Today, we are looking at the second part of the story from a book called Full Steam Ahead. This is part of the Angel Said Australia series. Frank Botrill built the biggest and most powerful traction engine ever constructed in Australia. They called it Big Lizzie. It was fitted with his special Dreadnaught wheels so it could sit on the sand without sinking. Big Lizzie could travel at around 2 kilometers per hour. Frank and his wife Margaret planned to drive Big Lizzie to Broken Hill to transport large bales of wool that the camel trains had been carrying from outback stations. Frank and Margaret thought it would take 9 months to get to Broken Hill, but the weather was awful. It rained constantly. When they got to Echuca, the river was in full flood, and the engine was too heavy for the bridge. They decided to change routes and head for Mildura, only to find the river flooded there too. After 2 years of traveling, they still couldn't get to Broken Hill. Meanwhile, Big Lizzie carted loads of wheat and helped to clear over 6,000 hectares of land in the Mallee for soldiers returning from World War I to farm. Frank and Margaret kept the Sabbath. Every Sabbath, Frank, Margaret, Big Lizzie, and the workers took a break from clearing to spend time with God. This frustrated the people he worked for. He often missed out on jobs because he wouldn't work on Saturdays. But Frank and Margaret didn't complain. They were doing what God asked them to do in the fourth commandment. Frank and Margaret used to invite the locals to come and spend time with them on Big Lizzie. People would come because they were curious about the huge engine. Then they would return because they liked the Botrills. Frank and Margaret were very excited when Pastor Walter Scragg arrived in June 1919 to run a tent mission. Frank and Margaret helped out with the meetings and became founding members of the Mildura Church when it was formed in November of the same year. We will find out what happens to Big Lizzie next time.
So it sounds like Frank's plans to get to Broken Hill with Big Lizzie have not been working out the way he wanted. But there are some other great things happening. Frank and Margaret were able to share the Sabbath with their neighbours. And Pastor Walter Scragg came and ran a tent mission to teach people about Jesus. Like the text says in Colossians 3:23 and 24, work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. I'm really looking forward to finding out what Frank and Margaret Botrill get up to next. Anyway, our time is up for today, but I will look forward to catching up with all of you again next time on Bible Buddies. So take care, stay safe, and God bless.
Learn about our wonderful God each day.
Stop and learn. Hey, stop.